My name is Cressida Thornley, and if there's one thing I've learned about family, it's that sometimes the word itself is just a pretty bow tying together a box of secrets and silent resentments. I never thought my life would split open on a sunny June afternoon on the cracked driveway outside my mother's suburban home. Yet that's exactly where this story begins. I'd driven 4 hours that morning. 4 hours of anxious thoughts rattling like loose coins in my skull, because I knew I was showing up to another charade. My mother, Eleanor Thornley, is the kind of woman who always sees herself reflected in crystal glass and mahogany frames. My older brother Spencer, the golden boy who can do no wrong, is her perfect heir. And me? I'm the hairline crack in the vase she keeps hidden behind the bouquet. But this year was different. I'd been invited, begrudgingly, to the annual pre-vacation family lunch. The family cruise was Eleanor's pride and joy. A week-long jaunt across the Caribbean, white linens and deck chairs, and endless lobster buffets. And every year since I turned 18, there'd been a reason why I shouldn't come along. You're too busy with work. It's just not the right time. It's so expensive, sweetheart, you wouldn't want to feel guilty. Always said with that strained smile, the kind that made me want to scratch my skin raw with the truth she wouldn't speak aloud. This time, I decided to show up. I parked my aging Honda Civic next to Spencer's gleaming Range Rover and took a deep breath. I'd made more progress in the past year than they'd ever know. I'd been working on something big, something that might change everything, but I wasn't ready to tell them yet. Today, I just wanted a seat at the table. I walked up the drive, my sandals crunching on the loose gravel. Through the half-open window, I could hear laughter, clinking cutlery, the soft hum of my mother's favorite string quartet CD. My heart slammed a nervous beat against my ribs as I rang the bell. No one answered. Typical. I let myself in. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary chicken and expensive candles. My mother was perched at the head of the dining table, pearls glinting at her neck, her manicure a shade of delicate rose. Spencer sat beside her, phone in hand, texting someone with that smug grin he wore like cologne. "Cressida, you're late," Eleanor said, not bothering to stand. "We started without you." I glanced at the half-eaten plates, the bottle of champagne already half empty. "I had to work this morning." "Work?" Spencer scoffed, not looking up. "Is that what you call it now?" I ignored him and found a seat. The table fell quiet for a moment, the air sticky with judgment and unsaid things. "So," my mother began, the words stretching like a wire pulled taut. "We were just discussing the cruise. Spencer's covering the deposit for everyone, as usual." Spencer leaned back, draping his arm along the chair like he owned the world. "It's family, right? We all chip in where we can." His eyes flicked to me, some more than others. Heat rose up my neck. I forced a smile. "Well, I'm happy to cover my part this time. I've been doing well." Spencer barked out a laugh. "Doing well? Cressida, you still live in that shoebox apartment, don't you?" "Spencer," Eleanor chided, but there was no real scolding in her tone. "Sweetheart, you know we love you, but this trip is, well, it's not cheap. And you've always hated feeling like you owe anyone." My chest tightened. "I said I can pay." She waved her hand dismissively. "Darling, let's be realistic. We can't have you worrying about money the entire time. You wouldn't enjoy yourself." Spencer added. "And the cabins are all booked. Premium suites, all inclusive. We'd have to downgrade if you came." I stared at them. "So that's it? I'm too poor to come on the family cruise?" My mother's mouth twitched, a flicker of something sharp behind her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. We're doing you a favor." The words echoed through me like a stone dropped into a well. Doing me a favor. The last morsel of chicken turned to ash in my mouth. I pushed my plate away. "You know what?" I stood, my chair scraping across the polished floor. "Enjoy your trip." "Don't be childish," Eleanor said, but I was already walking toward the door. My hands trembled as I grabbed my bag. I could feel Spencer's eyes on my back, that smug grin widening. I drove away on autopilot, tears stinging my eyes, not because I was surprised. No, I'd stopped being surprised by them long ago, but because I had hoped. Stupid, fragile hope. I parked my car in the lot by the marina, the place I'd been visiting in secret for the last year. I sat there for a while, watching the gentle sway of the boats against the docks. The scent of brine and saltwater calmed my hammering pulse. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. If they thought I was too poor for their cruise, I'd show them just how wrong they were, because they didn't know the one thing I'd kept hidden. I wasn't just some underpaid admin assistant anymore. I was the majority shareholder of Seastar Voyages, the very cruise line they'd booked their trip with. It hadn't been easy. I'd scrimped, invested every penny, worked 3 jobs, and learned the business inside out. I'd won over skeptical investors, outmaneuvered the old guard who'd run the company like a fiefdom. It was mine now. Every wave that carried those gleaming ships across the ocean carried my name, silent and powerful beneath the hull. A gust of sea breeze ruffled my hair as I stepped onto the dock, my resolve settling like steel in my bones. If they wanted to call me poor, I'd let them sip their champagne in ignorance a little while longer, but soon they'd find out. I'd make sure of it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, my mind still replaying every cutting word from that lunch like a looped recording I couldn't silence. But in the hush of the early hours, with the ocean air drifting in through my open window, my anger began to sharpen into something more useful. Resolve. I brewed a pot of bitter coffee and sat at my battered kitchen table with my laptop. The glow of the screen cast shadows across the stacks of papers and folders that had become my life these last 2 years. Business plans, investor pitch decks, quarterly earnings reports for Seastar Voyages. It was all here, meticulously organized and watched over like my own secret treasure hoard. They thought I was too poor? Let them. Because now I had an idea, one that made my chest pound with anticipation and dread in equal measure. I opened the guest manifest for the upcoming Caribbean Dream Voyage, the very cruise they'd so kindly excluded me from. Sure enough, there they were, Eleanor Thornley, Spencer Thornley, and his insufferable girlfriend Madison. 3 premium suites booked, their onboard account limits maxed out. I smiled to myself. They had no idea how close I'd been all this time. For a moment, the urge to just cancel their entire trip washed over me like a rogue wave. But no, that would be petty, and petty wasn't my style anymore. I had learned the art of the long game, and I knew that the sweetest revenge wasn't about taking something away. It was about letting people enjoy their illusions until the moment they shattered on the rocks of reality. I typed out an email to the guest services manager, requesting a discreet note in their file. Special accommodations to be made for Thornley party at owner's discretion. I paused, then added, no upgrades without owner approval. After I hit send, I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. They'd be boarding in 3 days. 3 days until I could stand on the dock in my crisp navy Seastar blazer, my name stitched in gold thread, and watch them realize who exactly owned the deck beneath their designer sandals. But as much as I wanted that moment, I knew it wasn't enough. I didn't want to embarrass them. I wanted to teach them what it meant to stand on the other side of the glass they'd always press my face against. I closed my laptop and showered quickly, letting the hot water chase the lingering chill of my family's rejection from my skin. When I emerged, I dressed in the outfit I'd bought last month but hadn't dared wear yet. Tailored white trousers, a pale blue silk blouse, and the gold necklace my grandmother had left me, the only inheritance they hadn't managed to take away. Before leaving, I glanced at my reflection. My hair was still damp, my eyes tired but bright with something alive. I looked like the woman I'd always hoped I could be, composed, focused, quietly powerful. A small smile tugged at my lips. At the marina, the Seastar Voyages headquarters was humming with the usual organized chaos. Dockworkers unloaded crates of fresh produce and linens. The reservation staff fielded last-minute upgrades for entitled passengers. I nodded to a few familiar faces on my way to the conference room. Inside, my team was already gathered. My COO, Marco, stood when I walked in. His easy grin and sharp eyes had been my anchor more times than I could count. He'd believed in me when no one else would. "Morning, boss," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "You look ready to conquer the Caribbean." "More than ever," I said, taking my seat. "I have a new directive for the Dream Voyage." The room quieted. Marco exchanged a look with Chloe, our head of guest relations. "We're implementing a trial upgrade of our VIP engagement program," I continued. "Certain guests, VIPs who've historically underappreciated the experience, will receive a more authentic taste of the average cabin accommodations." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "You want us to downgrade them?" The next morning, I woke up before dawn, my mind still replaying every cutting word from that lunch, like a looped recording I couldn't silence. But in the hush of the early hours, with the ocean air drifting in through my open window, my anger began to sharpen into something more useful. Resolve. I brewed a pot of bitter coffee and sat at my battered kitchen table with my laptop. The glow of the screen cast shadows across the stacks of papers and folders that had become my life these last 2 years. Business plans, investor pitch decks, quarterly earnings reports for Seastar Voyages. It was all here, meticulously organized and watched over like my own secret treasure hoard. They thought I was too poor? Let them. Because now I had an idea, one that made my chest pound with anticipation and dread in equal measure. I opened the guest manifest for the upcoming Caribbean Dream Voyage, the very cruise they'd so kindly excluded me from. Sure enough, there they were, Eleanor Thornley, Spencer Thornley, and his insufferable girlfriend Madison. 3 premium suites booked, their onboard account limits maxed out. I smiled to myself. They had no idea how close I'd been all this time. For a moment, the urge to just cancel their entire trip washed over me like a rogue wave. But no, that would be petty, and petty wasn't my style anymore. I'd learned the art of the long game, and I knew that the sweetest revenge wasn't about taking something away. It was about letting people enjoy their illusions until the moment they shattered on the rocks of reality. I typed out an email to the guest services manager, requesting a discreet note in their file. Special accommodations to be made for Thornley party at owner's discretion. I paused, then added, "No upgrades without owner approval." After I hit send, I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. They'd be boarding in 3 days. 3 days until I could stand on the dock in my crisp navy Seastar blazer, my name stitched in gold thread, and watch them realize who exactly owned the deck beneath their designer sandals. But as much as I wanted that moment, I knew it wasn't enough. I didn't want to embarrass them. I wanted to teach them what it meant to stand on the other side of the glass they'd always pressed my face against. I closed my laptop and showered quickly, letting the hot water chase the lingering chill of my family's rejection from my skin. When I emerged, I dressed in the outfit I'd bought last month, but hadn't dared wear yet. Tailored white trousers, a pale blue silk blouse, and the gold necklace my grandmother had left me, the only inheritance they hadn't managed to take away. Before leaving, I glanced at my reflection. My hair was still damp, my eyes tired but bright with something alive. I looked like the woman I'd always hoped I could be. Composed, focused, quietly powerful. A small smile tugged at my lips. At the marina, the Seastar Voyages headquarters was humming with the usual organized chaos. Dock workers unloaded crates of fresh produce and linens. The reservation staff fielded last-minute upgrades for entitled passengers. I nodded to a few familiar faces on my way to the conference room. Inside, my team was already gathered. My COO, Marco, stood when I walked in. His easy grin and sharp eyes had been my anchor more times than I could count. He'd believed in me when no one else would. "Morning, boss," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "You look ready to conquer the Caribbean." "More than ever," I said, taking my seat. "I have a new directive for the Dream Voyage." The room quieted. Marco exchanged a look with Chloe, our head of guest relations. "We're implementing a trial upgrade of our VIP engagement program," I continued. "Certain guests, VIPs who've historically underappreciated the experience will receive a more authentic taste of the average cabin accommodations. Chloe raised an eyebrow. You want us to downgrade them? Not everyone, just one family. I tapped the manifest. The Thornleys. Marco barked a laugh, then sobered when he saw I wasn't joking. Cressida, you sure you want to make this personal? I leaned forward, steepling my fingers. This isn't about revenge. It's about sending a message, one they won't forget. And it'll all be within company policy. They'll have the cruise they paid for, just not the one they expected. Silence settled over the table. Finally, Marco nodded. All right, consider it done. They'll be right above the engine room. I allowed myself a small laugh. Perfect. For the next few days, I threw myself into work like it was oxygen. My phone buzzed every few hours with new emails, investor updates, and the final passenger lists. Each time I saw their names, a thrill of vindication pulsed through me. On the morning of departure, I arrived at the dock before the sun crested the horizon. The massive Sea Star Dream loomed above the pier, its hull gleaming under the floodlights. Crew members scurried like ants, loading luggage and prepping check-in stations. I breathed in the salty air and felt more alive than I had in years. When the Thornleys finally arrived, I watched from my vantage point on the observation deck. Eleanor stepped out first, draped in a flowing caftan and oversized sunglasses, barking orders at the porter. Spencer followed, phone glued to his ear, Madison clinging to his arm like a designer handbag. They didn't see me at first. I waited until they were at the gangway before descending the metal stairs, my Sea Star blazer buttoned tight around me like armor. Mrs. Thornley, I called out, my voice calm, sweet as poison. Eleanor turned, her face frozen mid-complaint. Cressida? What are you? Welcome aboard, I said, extending my hand. I'm the owner representative for this voyage. I'll be personally ensuring you get the full Sea Star experience. Spencer's eyes narrowed. Owner representative? What the hell does that mean? Exactly what it sounds like. I smiled, enjoying the way his smug expression faltered. Follow me. I led them past the waiting crowd, ignoring Eleanor's whispered protests and Spencer's muttered curses. As we reached the check-in counter, I nodded at Chloe. The Thornley party will be in Suite 4C, she said smoothly. Eleanor's forehead crinkled. 4C? That's not the premium deck. We booked the Emerald Suites. I clasped my hands behind my back. There's been a last-minute adjustment due to overbooking. Company policy gives priority to long-term shareholders and top-tier loyalty guests. Spencer exploded. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much I paid for this? Of course. I leaned in slightly, dropping my voice so only they could hear. Consider this a chance to experience Sea Star like everyone else does. You might even learn something, Madison pouted. But we were supposed to have the private balcony and the butler. I cut her off with a polite smile. Complimentary earplugs will be provided. Suite 4C is above the main engine room. Eleanor looked like she might faint. Cressida, you can't do this. I can, I said. I own this ship. I own the line. And you? You can either board and enjoy your holiday, or step aside. Your choice. The look on Spencer's face as the realization sank in was worth every sleepless night, every penny invested, every moment of doubt I'd swallowed like bitter medicine. They boarded, red-faced and silent, and I followed at a distance, savoring the satisfaction pooling in my chest like warm sunlight. But as the ship's horn bellowed and we pulled away from the dock, a seed of unease settled in my gut. This was just the beginning. I knew them too well to think they'd let this go quietly. Out at sea, the waves have a way of churning up secrets, and I had a feeling the Thornleys weren't done trying to drag me down with theirs. I braced myself for whatever storm was coming next, the ocean stretching endless and wild before me. By the time the Sea Star Dream left the harbor behind and cut into the wide expanse of blue, I was back in my private suite, owner's quarters that few knew even existed. It was tucked behind a false wall on the executive deck, and while the furnishings were plush enough, walnut desk, floor-to-ceiling windows, crisp linen sheets, I hadn't chosen it for the luxury. I'd chosen it because it gave me an unobstructed view of the ocean, a place where I could breathe. I pressed my palm against the glass. The waves fanned out in the ship's wake, white ribbons on a cobalt canvas. Below, the Thornleys were no doubt discovering their new accommodations. I pictured Eleanor's pearl necklace trembling with every engine vibration, Spencer's entitled huff echoing in the narrow hallways, Madison trying not to wrinkle her nose at the cramped bunks. The image made me want to laugh, but it didn't last. A part of me, a small, stubborn part, wondered if I'd gone too far. Was I just becoming another version of them? Petty, vindictive, so desperate to win that I'd forgotten what I was fighting for in the first place? A soft knock snapped me out of it. I turned as Marco stepped in, the door shutting with a quiet click behind him. He looked like he hadn't slept, but then again, neither had I. "Your mother just called the front desk," he said, leaning against the bookshelf. "She's demanding an upgrade. Again." I smirked. "And?" He spread his hands. "We told her all premium suites are fully booked." Which, technically, is true. I crossed to my desk and picked up the thick folder lying open. Staffing schedules, guest complaints, the maintenance log. Let her stew. She'll have to accept it eventually. Marco hesitated. "Cressida, I know you think this is what you need to do. But you should know, word's getting around. Some of the staff think it's personal. They're worried it sets the wrong precedent." I tapped the folder closed. "Is it personal, Marco?" He studied me, that same patient gaze he'd given me when I'd pitched him the first round of funding 2 years ago. "It doesn't matter what I think. What do you think?" I dropped into the chair, my shoulders sagging. I think they've been stepping on my neck for so long that I forgot what standing feels like. I don't want to humiliate them. I want them to see me, really see me, and I want them to understand that I was never the one who was lacking. Marco gave a small, sad smile. "Well then, maybe this is what it takes." He pushed off the bookshelf and straightened his jacket. "Dinner with the captain in 2 hours. He wants to discuss the new itinerary." I nodded. After he left, I sat for a while, staring at my reflection in the glass. The ocean behind me was endless, a mirror for the deep places I'd spent so many years refusing to dive into. I decided to walk the decks before dinner. Sometimes you learn more from drifting through the common areas than from any report, and tonight, I needed to see the people who kept this floating city alive. The corridors bustled with staff prepping for the first formal dinner. I stopped to help a young attendant struggling with an overturned cart, earning a grateful smile and a hushed, "Thank you, ma'am." In the children's play area, I lingered just long enough to watch a small boy press his hands against the glass, mesmerized by the swirling sea. When I reached deck 4, I paused outside the Thornleys' cabin. I could hear Spencer's voice, low and angry, bleeding through the door. "Not what we paid for, Madison. Do you know who I am?" Her voice, muffled but sharp, cut him off. "Who you are? Spencer, she owns this place. There's nothing you can do." I didn't linger. I moved on, stepping back into the main atrium just as the dinner bell chimed. The guests in their tuxedos and glittering gowns drifted toward the grand ballroom, laughter and the soft strains of a string quartet filling the air. Inside, the captain, Thomas Renaud, a wiry man with salt and pepper hair and eyes like a hawk's, stood to greet me. "Miss Thornley," he said with a small nod. "An interesting evening, yes?" I settled into my seat across from him, accepting the flute of champagne offered by a passing server. "Captain Renaud, thank you for meeting me." He lifted a brow. "Word travels fast on a ship, even one this size. Your family's adjustment is already the talk of the crew." I held his gaze. "Are you questioning my decision?" He gave a soft chuckle. "Not my place. I've seen worse power plays on these decks. But I would caution you. The sea has a long memory, so do families." I swirled the golden bubbles in my glass. "I'm not looking to erase the past. Just rewrite the ending." He inclined his head, and for the rest of the meal we spoke only of business. The new sustainability measures I'd been pushing for, the upcoming fleet expansion, the training gaps we still needed to close. But beneath it all, I felt the unspoken current. A test. A reminder that owning something and leading it weren't always the same thing. After dinner, I returned to my quarters to find an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no address, just my name in bold block letters. Cressida. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed. Clinical. Nuino, how you got the shares. We know who helped you. Enjoy your cruise while you can. Nuino, 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 Nuino. My breath caught. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my hand. My mind raced. Who was we? Who still cared enough to dig into my past? And what exactly did they think they knew? I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over Marco's number. But I didn't press dial. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was really up against. I stayed awake that night, listening to the creak of the hull, the deep thrum of the engines. Somewhere below, my family slept in their cramped cabin, their illusions unraveling thread by thread. Above them, I sat with my pulse ticking like a metronome, staring at the letter until dawn painted the horizon pink. If they wanted a war, they'd picked the wrong ocean. But part of me knew this was only the first wave. The sky was the color of tarnished silver the next morning, clouds roiling low over the horizon, as if the sea itself had decided to keep my secrets. I sat alone on my private balcony, a mug of black coffee cradled in my hands, the letter from last night spread open on the small table beside me. The words blurred and sharpened each time I blinked. We know how you got the shares. Of course they did. Or they thought they did. It wouldn't be hard to spin my years of sacrifice, of calculated deals and behind-the-scenes negotiations, into something nefarious. But the part that made my stomach twist was the second line. We know who helped you. That was the part that could break more than just me. I stood and paced the length of the balcony. Below, the deck crew were busy tying down lounge chairs and securing the pool covers. A storm was coming. You could smell it in the salt-heavy air, feel it in the static clinging to your hair. I liked the sea like this. Wild, unpolished, honest. A knock pulled me back inside. Marco's voice came through the door. It's me. I let him in, his eyes immediately flicking to the letter on the table. He picked it up, read it, and let out a low whistle. Anonymous threats now? That's how you know you've made it. I didn't laugh. I don't think it's just a threat. Someone's digging. Marco sat, elbows on his knees. Who would risk that? Everyone who matters signed NDAs when you bought in. The old guard cashed out. They have no leverage left. There's always leverage, Marco. You know that better than anyone. He sighed. You want me to run a check? See who's been snooping? I shook my head. Not yet. Let them think. I don't know. For now, focus on the Thornleys. If they try to cause trouble, I want to know before it hits the staff. He nodded, slipping the letter into his inner pocket. You know, you're stronger than you think. If they come at you, you'll handle it. I forced a small smile. I don't have a choice. After he left, I pulled on a windbreaker and made my way to the middeck. The air was thick and briny, the first spatter of rain dotting the teak planks under my shoes. Guests were already murmuring about the sudden change in weather. Some looked annoyed. Others seemed excited, as if the storm would make their luxury holiday more authentic. I almost didn't see them until I was right behind them. Eleanor, Spencer, and Madison, huddled under a large umbrella near the poolside bar. My mother's eyes were narrowed, her lips pulled tight. Spencer looked furious, cheeks flushed, hands slicing through the air as he spoke. Humiliating me in front of everyone, Mother. You said you'd handle her. Instead, she's prancing around like she owns the place. She does own the place, Spencer, Madison hissed. And maybe if you stopped shouting for 5 seconds, you'd realize she's not going to just hand it back. Eleanor's eyes flicked up and met mine. The umbrella tilted slightly, exposing them to the drizzle. She gave me that same sharp-edged smile she'd perfected years ago, the one that said she still believed she could bend me to her will if she just found the right pressure point. Cressida, darling, we were just talking about you. Mother, I folded my arms. Enjoying your new accommodations? Spencer made a choking sound. You think this is funny? The cabin's a broom closet. I can hear the engines all night. I haven't slept. Life's funny like that, I said, deadpan. You get what you pay for. Or, in this case, what you deserve. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping. This isn't you, Cressida. You've always been better than petty power games. You made the rules, Mother. I'm just playing by them now. She leaned in, close enough that I could smell the expensive floral perfume she always wore. You think you've won because you signed a few papers and wear a blazer with your name on it? This is a family matter. You can't shut us out forever. I held her gaze, the storm wind whipping my hair across my face. Watch me. Without waiting for her reply, I turned and walked away, my shoes slipping slightly on the rain-slicked deck. Their voices faded behind me, swallowed by the rumble of thunder somewhere far out to sea. Back in my quarters, I toweled my hair dry and pulled up my secure drive. I'd always known this day might come, that they'd eventually try to worm their way back in when they realized the money they'd mocked me for chasing was real, and that it came with power they hadn't accounted for. I found the file I'd kept hidden under layers of encryption. Every contract, every email, every signed agreement that made my stake in Sea Star voyages untouchable. There was one name, though, that could never see the light of day. My silent partner. The one person who'd stepped in when the banks slammed their doors and the old shareholders laughed me out of the first pitch meeting. I closed the file and exhaled shakily. They didn't know. They couldn't know. A knock came again, this time softer. I opened the door to find Chloe, our head of guest relations, holding a tablet in one hand and an apologetic expression in the other. Sorry to interrupt, she said. I thought you'd want to see this. She flipped the tablet toward me. The screen displayed a live feed from the guest lounge. Spencer was there, pacing in front of a small group of passengers, his voice rising in an impromptu performance that made my blood run cold. Abused her position. She's not qualified to run this company. You all paid for premium service and you're getting ripped off. A few guests looked uncomfortable. Others nodded along, drawn to the scent of scandal the way sharks circle blood. I clenched my jaw. How many people are listening to him? Too many, Chloe said. If this keeps up, we could have guests demanding refunds. It could hit our ratings. Let him talk, I said after a beat. But tomorrow we counter it. Set up a captain's reception, open bar, Q&A with me. Full transparency. If he wants a fight in public, he'll get it on my terms. Chloe smiled. That's the Cressida I know. After she left, I stared at the rain pelting my window. The storm was here, slashing across the waves in sheets of silver and slate. Below, the engines hummed steadily, a reminder that no matter how rough the sea got, I was the one at the helm now. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't dialed in over a year. The person who'd once told me, if you ever get in over your head, call me. My thumb hovered, the roar of the ocean like static in my ears. Then I hit call. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice I hadn't heard in so long that it made my chest ache answered, calm and amused as ever. Cressida Thornley. I wondered when you'd need me again. I swallowed. They're trying to dig up the past. I think they know about you. A pause, then a low laugh. Then let them dig. But remember what I told you, love. Never show them your anchor. Let them drown in the storm they wanted. As the line clicked dead, lightning split the sky above the Sea Star Dream. The hull shuddered beneath my feet, the ship a living thing pushing forward into the dark. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin, and this time, I wouldn't just stand my ground. I'd own every wave that came crashing toward me. Dawn crept in behind the retreating storm, smearing the sky with streaks of gold and bruised violet. I hadn't slept. My mind spun with every possible angle. The anonymous threat, Spencer's loud accusations in the lounge, my mother's calculated smiles that always came with a hidden hook. I stood on the bridge beside Captain Renault as the first blush of sunlight hit the water. He gave me a sidelong look. Rough night? I traced the horizon with my gaze. Nothing I can't handle. He didn't push further. I liked that about him. Unflappable, quietly observant. He turned back to his charts, and I slipped away, my shoes clicking softly on the metal deck. Below, the ship stirred with early risers, guests milling about with their espressos, gossip already buzzing like flies around honey. By midday, the captain's reception was in full swing. I'd ordered the staff to transform the main lounge into something out of an old Riviera postcard. Crisp white linens, towers of shrimp cocktail, strings of fairy lights that danced like fireflies even in the daylight. An open bar, generous pours, no tabs. If Spencer wanted a show, he'd get one, but not the one he'd planned. I stood at the head of the room, microphone in hand, my Sea-Star blazer swapped for a tailored navy jumpsuit that made me feel like the version of myself I'd fought so hard to become. Strong. In command. The room fell quiet when I stepped up. Spencer was there, arms folded, lips twisted in a smug half-smile like he thought he'd already won. Eleanor hovered near the back, her face a mask of polite disapproval. I took a breath. Good afternoon, everyone. I know some of you have heard rumors about me, about this ship, about what we stand for. I believe in transparency, so I'd like to answer any questions you might have. Ask me anything. A murmur rippled through the room. A man in a linen suit raised his hand. Is it true you bought out the old owners overnight? That you forced them out? I smiled. It's true. I acquired the majority shares in one transaction. But there was no force. They named their price, I met it. It's called business. A woman in pearls piped up. What about the rumor you're downgrading loyal guests to make room for your favorites? I kept my eyes steady on hers. We have a loyalty program based on clear criteria: years sailed, referrals, feedback scores. There are no favorites, only guests who respect what Sea-Star is about. As for the Thornley suite, that was my decision as owner. Family is complicated, but the rest of you deserve the best experience we can offer. Period. Spencer stepped forward, voice dripping poison. You're just a secretary who got lucky. You stole. I held up my hand. Spencer, if you want to discuss theft, maybe we should talk about the business loan you took in my name at 22. Or the trust fund you raided when Dad died. A hush fell. Eleanor's mouth twitched, her eyes flicking around, looking for any exit that might swallow her whole. Spencer sputtered. That's a lie. It's documented, I said calmly. You gambled away what Dad left me. You mocked me for working 3 jobs. You told everyone I was a lost cause. Well, here we are. I looked out at the guests, the waves of their shifting expressions. Shock, curiosity, pity. But I didn't care about pity. I cared that they saw the truth. I built Sea-Star Voyages up because I wanted a place where people could see the world without being reminded they don't belong. No one here is too poor or too small. Not anymore. A round of applause started, tentative at first, then rolling through the lounge like a warm tide. Spencer turned on his heel and stormed out. Eleanor stayed rooted, her knuckles white around her clutch. After the last question, I stepped off the dais. Chloe met me at the edge, eyes wide with a grin. You killed it. I've never seen them eat out of anyone's hand like that. I let out a shaky laugh. Let's hope it sticks. Later that night, when the crowd had drifted to the gala dinner and the decks were hushed under a canopy of stars, I found Spencer waiting outside my suite. He was slumped against the wall, glassy-eyed, reeking of the cheap whiskey they served at the back bar when the top shelf ran dry. Cressida, he slurred, you think you're so special, but you're just the same as her. Go to bed, Spencer. He lurched forward, grabbing my arm. You think you can keep this secret forever? You think you're untouchable? Wait till everyone knows who bankrolled you. My stomach dropped. What do you know? He leaned in, breath sour. The old man, the investor. You think people won't care? They'll tear you apart when they find out what you did for him." I shoved him off, my pulse hammering. "You're drunk. Go sleep it off." He laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "You're not the boss of me, Cress." I watched him stagger down the corridor, my mind spinning. He didn't have the whole truth. He couldn't. But even a scrap, spun the wrong way, could ruin everything I'd built. I went back inside, locked the door, and sank to the floor, my back against the wood. Outside, the ship cut smoothly through the midnight water, each wave whispering secrets I hadn't wanted to hear. I picked up my phone again, my thumb trembling. I needed to talk to my silent partner, but what would I even say? That I was scared? That the fortress I'd built felt like sand under my feet? Instead, I typed out a single message. "He's guessing, but he knows." The reply came in seconds. "Then you know what you have to do." I closed my eyes, the words burning behind my eyelids. I did know. If I wanted to survive this, I had to finish what I started. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The next morning, the gossip was everywhere. Snippets drifted from poolside loungers, filtered through the cafe lines, buzzed on the staff's walkie-talkies. Eleanor had retreated to her cabin, claiming seasickness. But I knew better. Spencer was nowhere to be seen. I found Madison alone at the buffet, picking at a croissant she clearly had no intention of eating. She looked up when I sat across from her, eyes rimmed red. "He didn't come back to the cabin last night," she said, voice thin. "You humiliated him, Cressida. You made him look small." "He made himself small," she flinched. "You know he's not strong like you. He's weak. He's always been weak. But you're terrifying." I tilted my head. "Is that what he told you?" She wiped her eyes. "I just want to go home." "You will. Soon." But the truth was, I wasn't sure how soon. The ship was days away from the final port, and I couldn't afford to let Spencer do any more damage. He'd crossed a line, and I had no illusions about what he was capable of when cornered. That night, a storm hit hard. The Sea Star Dream rocked and shuddered as rain lashed the windows, and wind howled through the decks. I stood alone on the bridge again, watching lightning fork across the sky. Captain Renaud joined me, arms folded behind his back. "There's talk of mutiny," he said dryly. "Your brother's trying to rally support." I barked a sharp laugh. "Let him try. Be careful, Miss Thornley. Desperate men make reckless choices." I met his eyes, the wind battering the glass. So do desperate women. Below, in the deepest shadows of the ship, I knew Spencer was plotting. And above, in my hidden suite, I was planning something else entirely. If the Thornleys wanted to drag me down, they'd better know how to swim. The storm raged through the night like some ancient beast come to test the hull's resolve. Waves slammed the Sea Star Dream's sides with bone-rattling force, sending vibrations up through the steel and into my chest every time I closed my eyes. But I didn't sleep. I sat by the window in the dark, phone clutched in my hand, staring at the half-typed message to my silent partner that I couldn't bring myself to send. My mind kept drifting back to Spencer's words. He was reckless, yes, but his recklessness made him dangerous. I knew him well enough to recognize that when his pride was wounded, his desperation to claw back control would drive him to the edge. And anyone standing between him and that delusion, me, the company, our guests, could become collateral damage. A sharp rap on my door jolted me from my thoughts. Marco slipped inside, rain still clinging to his jacket. He tossed a folder onto the coffee table between us, water spots blooming across its cover. "He's been trying to bribe the housekeeping staff," Marco said, voice tight with disbelief. "Offered one kid $5,000 to get into your private files." I snorted. 5 grand? Shows you how much he thinks my secrets are worth. Marco didn't smile. He's also been poking around Chloe's desk. Tried to pull the guest logs from IT. He's sloppy but persistent. I rubbed my temples, the beginnings of a headache throbbing just behind my eyes. So what do you suggest? Marco leaned forward. We corner him. Shut this down before it festers. We invite him up here. No public scene. Just you, him, and me. Make him say what he knows. Make him see he's out of moves. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to bury this all in a neat file and lock it away forever. But I'd built my entire empire on the principle that the only way through the storm was straight ahead. All right, I said. Bring him up. Tonight. Marco's smile was grim. He won't like it. That's the point. ... It was after midnight when Spencer stumbled into my suite, his hair plastered to his forehead from the rain, his eyes wild. Marco shut the door behind him and stood guard like an unmoving pillar by the bookshelf. Spencer didn't sit. He paced instead, dripping water onto my hardwood floor, leaving a trail of salt and storm with every step. So, this is it? He spat. An intervention? Going to lecture me about family loyalty? I folded my arms. No. This is me giving you one last chance to shut your mouth before you bury yourself. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you can scare me? You think your little empire makes you untouchable? I know what you did. I know who funded you. You think those old men care about you? You're a placeholder, Cressida. A PR stunt. They'll toss you overboard when they're done. You don't know anything, I said evenly. And if you did, you'd know better than to threaten me on my own ship. Spencer lunged forward so fast Marco had to step in between us. But I didn't flinch. I held my brother's furious stare, close enough to see the blood vessels in his eyes burst with rage. I will ruin you, he hissed. I will tell everyone. I'll get the board to investigate. The board? I let out a bark of laughter. You idiot. There is no board. I bought them out. Every single share. The only reason you're standing here is because I haven't tossed you and Mother off at the nearest port. He went pale. You wouldn't dare. Marco stepped closer. Voice calm but lethal. Try her. For a moment, the room was so quiet I could hear the storm easing, the creak of the ship settling back into gentle swells. Spencer's shoulders sagged, all that false bravado leaking out of him like stale air. What do you want from me? He said, finally, his voice small, the child he used to be peeking through the cracks. I stepped forward, so close I could see the stubble on his jaw, the tremor in his hands. I want you to pack your bags. You, Mother, Madison, get off my ship at the next port. Disappear. Live off the scraps you stole from Dad's trust. But if you ever breathe my name again, if you ever so much as whisper a word about my silent partner, I will make sure you never work, never invest, never even open a checking account without my signature on the dotted line. Do you understand me? His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Do you understand? I said again, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a blade in my mouth. His head bobbed once, a nod, a surrender. Good, I said. Marco will see you out. When the door clicked shut behind them, I collapsed into my chair, all the adrenaline draining from my body in one dizzying rush. I stared at the framed picture on my desk. My father, a rare candid shot of him laughing at some joke I couldn't remember. He'd never lived to see me take back what they'd stolen from both of us. I traced the glass with my fingertip. Almost done, Dad. Almost. ... The next morning dawned bright and sharp, as if the storm had scoured every corner of the sky clean. Word spread quickly through the ship that the Thornleys had disembarked at Nassau under the cover of dawn. No public scenes, no dramatic goodbyes. Just 3 shadows slipping away from my life like low tide receding from the shore. In the days that followed, I walked the decks freely for the first time in years. Guests stopped me to shake my hand, to thank me for the reception, for my honesty. The crew stood a little taller, their trust in me cemented by what they'd seen, and what I hadn't let them see. But beneath that calm surface, the letter still burned in the back of my mind. The threat, the one piece of unfinished business that could pull me under if I didn't face it. One evening, I found myself in the observation lounge at the bow, alone but not lonely. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, the sun dipping below the horizon like a coin slipping into a wishing well. I pulled out my phone and typed one final message to my silent partner. "It's time." The reply came as a single line. "Dock at Southampton. I'll meet you there." My pulse fluttered in my throat. I pocketed the phone, my reflection wavering in the glass like a ghost. This partnership had always been the lifeline I clung to in my darkest hours. But now? Now it felt like a chain I was finally ready to break. I pressed my palm to the glass, feeling the thrum of the engines vibrating up through my bones. Almost home. Almost free. And for the first time since this voyage began, I let myself believe I might actually make it. When the Sea Star Dream finally glided into Southampton, the sky was a pale, forgiving blue. For once, there were no storms on the horizon, no bruised clouds churning over the waves. But inside me, the storm hadn't settled. It had merely taken on a new shape. I stood at the railing as the port grew larger, the docks bristling with cranes and waiting taxis. Somewhere down there, my silent partner would be waiting, as promised. I could still feel the phone vibrating in my pocket. Another text, another reminder that this last piece of the puzzle had to be laid bare if I wanted to sail forward free. Marco appeared at my side. He looked exhausted but steadier now that the Thornleys were gone. He handed me a folder, my final passenger reports, staff commendations, some requests from the new investors. "Everything you asked for," he said, voice low. "You sure you want to do this alone?" I nodded. "This started with me. It ends with me." He hesitated, then laid a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Cressida. No matter what they say." I didn't answer him. I just watched the dock inch closer, the sea breeze tangling my hair. When the gangway was finally lowered, I made my way down the steps alone, my boots landing solidly on the weathered wood. The port buzzed with activity, families hauling luggage, cab drivers waving signs, porters barking orders. But in the middle of it all stood the one person who'd haunted my thoughts every mile of this voyage. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Silver threaded through his once black hair, his suit a little more rumpled than I'd expected. But the smile was the same, sharp, knowing as if he could see straight through my ribcage to the secret I'd buried there years ago. "Cressida Thornley," he said, opening his arms. "The Queen of the Sea herself." I let him pull me into a brief hug, stiff and awkward. When I stepped back, my eyes met his. "It's done. They're gone." He raised an eyebrow. "And the letter?" I handed him the crumpled sheet from my pocket. He read it in silence, his lips curling slightly at the corners. "Idle threats? You did the right thing." "It doesn't feel like it," I said. "You shouldn't have to hide anymore." "I shouldn't either." He chuckled. "You always were the moral one. That's what made me bet on you." My jaw tightened. "It wasn't a bet. You knew what you were doing. You knew you'd have your hooks in me forever if I said yes." He tilted his head, the seagulls crying overhead. "Did I hold a gun to your head? You wanted that first investment. You wanted it so badly you didn't care where it came from." I flinched. He was right. Back then I'd been drowning. An admin assistant with a mountain of debt and a dream that no bank would touch. He'd been my life raft, my golden ticket, and my gilded cage. "I'm buying you out," I said. "Every last share. Full payout. I've lined up a new backer, someone clean. No hidden favors, no secrets. I'm not your pet project anymore." He laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Who says I'd sell?" I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Because you like the game more than you like the prize. And you've already made 10 times your investment off me. Walk away now, and you're a legend. Drag this out, and you'll be exposed. You know I have the paperwork to bury you if you push me." He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged, almost fondly. "You've grown teeth, little Thornley. Fine, send me the terms. But you and I both know you'll need someone like me again someday." "Not like you," I said softly. "Never again." He reached out, brushing a speck of dust off my lapel. "Don't get soft now. The world's not kind to girls who think they can swim with sharks." I stepped back, putting a wall of sea air between us. "I'm not swimming with sharks anymore. I'm the ocean." His laugh followed me as I turned on my heel and walked back toward the waiting town cars, the hull of my ship towering behind me like a promise. I didn't look back. Dash, 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 dot, dot. The drive from Southampton Port to my new office felt like a baptism by asphalt and drizzle. Marco had arranged for a modest space, a converted warehouse overlooking the harbor, with big glass windows and the smell of new paint clinging to the exposed beams. I liked it already. It felt raw, unfinished, honest. Inside, Chloe was waiting with 2 cups of takeaway coffee and a grin that made me think maybe, just maybe, this storm had cleared the way for something better. "Your new backer's ready to sign," she said, handing me a steaming cup. "No strings. You sure you want to run everything through them?" I sipped the coffee, letting the heat settle my nerves. "We do this by the book now. No shadows, no ghosts." She raised an eyebrow. "And your family?" I glanced at my phone. No new messages from Eleanor or Spencer. Part of me wondered if I'd ever hear from them again. If some small part of me would miss it. The fight, the push and pull that had defined me for so long. "Gone," I said. "Let them stay ghosts." Chloe tilted her head, her grin softening. "You're really free." I set my coffee down and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sea sprawled out in front of me like an open book. For the first time in years, I felt the weight slide off my shoulders. Not because I'd won. This wasn't that kind of victory. But because I'd finally stopped playing by rules I never agreed to. "You know what the best part is?" I said, half to her, half to the restless waves below. "What?" "I don't owe anyone a damn thing anymore." She laughed, full and bright, echoing in the high-ceilinged space. "Cheers to that, boss." I pressed my palm to the glass, watching a cargo ship ease out of the harbor. The sun slipped through the clouds in pale ribbons, turning the water into molten gold. I wondered if my father would be proud of this version of me. Weathered, ruthless when I needed to be, soft enough to still taste the salt on the wind. Somewhere deep inside I thought he would be. I took one last sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. The storm was behind me. The horizon was wide open. And for the first time since I'd stepped onto that cracked driveway all those months ago, I knew exactly where I was headed. The days that followed felt almost dreamlike, like stepping out of a hurricane only to find the sky impossibly clear, but I knew better than to trust calm seas for long. There was still work to be done, threads of my old life that needed to be cut, tied, or carefully woven into something new. The Sea Star Dream docked at Southampton for maintenance and crew turnover. I spent my days in the warehouse office, a fortress of exposed brick and sunlight, signing papers that finally made my buyout official. My silent partner's shares were transferred into my name, every legal clause scrubbed of the fingerprints that had once bound me to him like a ghost. The new backers, quiet, clean capital, signed on without fuss. For the first time, Sea Star Voyages was truly mine. Every plank of its decks, every wave that carried it forward. At night, I found it harder to sleep. The storm inside me had settled into a quieter hum, but sleep didn't come easy when your mind had been conditioned for years to expect betrayal at every creak in the dark. So I did what I'd always done. I walked the docks at dawn, letting the ocean air rinse the worries from my skin. One morning, I spotted a figure leaning against the rail at the far end of the marina, a woman in a tan trench coat, her hair pulled back tight. For a split second, my pulse spiked. "Eleanor?" But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't her. It was Madison. She turned when she heard my footsteps, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She looked softer somehow, as if the salt wind had stripped away the veneer she'd worn next to Spencer for all those years. "Cressida?" she said, voice thin. I didn't know where else to go. I leaned against the rail beside her, the cold metal biting through the fabric of my coat. Where's Spencer? She gave a hollow laugh. Probably holed up in some sad hotel suite, still trying to find someone who'll listen to him rant about how you ruined his life. I didn't reply. I just waited. She rubbed her hands together, knuckles raw and red. I left him, booked my own ticket home. I didn't come to ask you for anything. I just needed you to know. Part of me wanted to snap at her, to remind her how she'd looked at me from the safety of Spencer's arm, pitying, dismissive, complicit. But something in her eyes made the words catch in my throat. Good, I said finally. You deserve better, she snorted. Better? I don't even know who I am without him. Isn't that pathetic? I shook my head. It's not pathetic. It's honest. You'll figure it out. We all do eventually. Madison turned to face me fully, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You were always stronger than us. Even when you were the joke at the family table. I see that now. A gull wheeled overhead, its cry sharp in the brittle morning air. I reached out and squeezed her hand once. Just once. No promises, no illusions of sisterhood. Just a quiet understanding between two women who had learned, in different ways, how to survive men like Spencer Thornley. When she left, I watched her walk down the dock until she disappeared into the shifting crowd of travelers. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. Maybe that was for the best. .. Back at the warehouse, Chloe and Marco were waiting. They'd made themselves at home. Chloe sprawled on the battered leather couch with a tablet, Marco pacing like a caged tiger between the window and the coffee station. How'd it go? Chloe asked, eyes flicking up. I shrugged out of my coat, letting the warmth of the office seep into my bones. She's gone. I think she'll be okay. Marco raised an eyebrow. So Thornley's officially out of our hair? For good, I said. No more backroom threats, no more family drama. Just us and the company now. He tossed me a manila envelope. Perfect timing then. New fleet proposals came in this morning. We've got investors sniffing around for expansion in the Med. And the loyalty program? Chloe's revamping it top to bottom. Chloe grinned. We're ditching the old hierarchy. No more power trips for people like your mother to exploit. Fair tiers, clear perks, no special favors for family or legacy names. I dropped into my chair, flipping through the proposals. Good. Keep it clean. No more secrets tucked into the folds. Marco crossed his arms. And the press? They still want an exclusive. Your comeback story. From too poor for the family cruise to owning the line. You want to give them that? I paused, the weight of it pressing down on me. The idea of laying my life bare for the tabloids made my skin crawl. But maybe there was power in that too. Set up the interview, I said. One time only. I'll tell them my story on my terms. After that, I'm done feeding the rumor mill. Chloe raised her coffee cup in a toast. To clean slates and honest seas. I tapped mine against hers, a small smile playing at my lips. To never letting anyone call me too poor again. .. The next weeks blurred into a relentless wave of planning meetings, legal briefings, and quiet moments when I would find myself staring out the window, still half expecting a storm to gather on the horizon. But none came. If there's one thing the ocean teaches you, it's that calm can be real too. You just have to stop bracing for impact long enough to feel it. The night before my big interview, I found myself back at the marina. The Sea Star Dream rested at her berth, lights glowing soft and golden through the portholes. She looked like something out of a storybook, strong, elegant, waiting for the next adventure. I traced my hand along the hull, the cool steel humming under my palm. Thank you, I whispered. Not to the ship itself, but to every version of me that had fought tooth and nail to get here. The scared admin assistant, the furious daughter, the woman who'd learned to wield her father's name like a sword instead of a chain. Inside my head, I heard my father's laugh again, that rare sound that used to echo through our tiny house on nights when he'd let himself forget the weight of the world. I hoped he could see me now. No longer that hairline crack in the vase they hid behind the bouquet, but the hand that held the whole thing together. When I finally turned away, the moon slipped out from behind the clouds, casting the ship in silver and shadow. The water lapped at the dock below, steady as a heartbeat. Tomorrow, I would speak the truth. Not because I needed their approval, but because it was time to leave nothing hidden in the dark. Tomorrow, I would tell the world who I really was. The morning of the interview dawned clear and bright, the kind of day that made the sea outside my window shimmer like 1,000 tiny mirrors. I sat cross-legged on the worn leather couch in my warehouse office, a mug of tea cooling at my feet, the questions I'd scribbled out the night before scattered around me like confetti. Chloe and Marco hovered nearby, pretending not to hover. Chloe had her tablet in one hand, but her eyes kept drifting back to me. Marco stood with his back to the big window, arms folded, his reflection ghosting across the glass as he studied the street below. "You don't have to do this, you know," Chloe said softly, breaking the silence that had settled over us since dawn. "You could cancel. They'd spin it anyway, but at least they wouldn't have your words to twist." I shook my head. "No. If I don't speak now, they'll fill the gaps for me. I've spent too long letting people talk about me instead of to me." Marco let out a low grunt of agreement. "Then don't hold back. Give them the real story. Warts and all." I laughed under my breath, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Don't worry. I planned to." The interview was set up in a small cafe overlooking the marina, a place I'd chosen for its big windows and soft natural light. I wanted the sea at my back, a quiet reminder that this was my territory now. No one could twist that part. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie, greeted me with a firm handshake. She didn't waste time on pleasantries, which I appreciated. She'd done her research. Hard questions, no fluff. Good. I was done with fluff. We settled into a corner booth. Chloe and Marco lingered just inside, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to pretend they weren't there. Valerie's recorder sat between us like a tiny, patient witness. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's do it." She clicked the recorder on. Cressida Thornley. From too poor for a family cruise to owning the entire cruise line. How did it happen? I took a breath. It didn't happen overnight. It happened because I spent years being underestimated. Every slight, every snub, every time they called me a burden or a disappointment, I banked it like capital. I learned. I watched. And when the moment came to make my move, I took it. No apologies. Valerie's pen scratched across her notebook. "Your family says you were reckless, that you took help from less than reputable sources." My jaw twitched, but I didn't flinch. I took help from someone who saw potential when no one else did. Was it clean? No, but I made it clean. I bought him out. Every share, every hidden clause, gone. Seastar is mine now, and it's going to stay that way. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you regret it?" "Regret," I repeated, tasting the word. "I regret believing that I had to ask their permission to exist. I regret wasting years trying to earn love that was never unconditional. But the deal? No, that deal made me who I am." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. She was expecting more spin, less steel. I gave her both, because that was the truth. I'd stopped dressing my scars up as something prettier. Valerie shifted gears. "And your brother, Spencer? Your mother?" "Gone," I said simply. "They tried to tear me down when they realized they couldn't control me. They failed. I wish them no harm. But I wish them no place in my life either." The recorder's light blinked steady, catching every syllable like a net-catching fish. Valerie leaned in, lowering her voice as if the whole world might be listening through the cafe windows. "Final question. Who are you now, Cressida?" I thought of the cracked driveway, my battered Civic, the countless nights in cheap hotel rooms with only my spreadsheets and my ambition for company. I thought of the gentle roar of the engines under my feet, the salt wind in my hair, the letter that had almost undone me, and the freedom I'd clawed back with bloodied nails. "I'm the captain of my own story," I said, "and I'll never let anyone else hold the wheel again." She smiled, just slightly. The recorder clicked off. Dash dash dash, dot dot. That night, I stood on the Sea Star Dream's top deck alone, the dock lights glittering below like fallen stars. Guests bustled down the gangway, laughter and luggage wheels echoing off the gangplanks. I could have hidden inside my suite, let the staff handle the final checks, but I wanted to feel it. What I'd built, what I'd saved. Marco joined me, hands jammed in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the briny breeze. "They're already running the first quotes," he said, nodding at my phone. "You're trending." I laughed softly. "God help us." He studied me, eyes sharp but warm. "You know, I almost didn't invest that first time. You were wild, untested. But you had something. Something that made me think, this one's different." I nudged his arm with my elbow. "And now?" "Now I know," he said. "You're not different. You're one of a kind." I looked out at the horizon, dark and endless and mine. That's all I ever wanted. Dash 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 dot dot. 2 days later, I got an email. No name in the subject line. Just, "Thought you should know." Attached was a short clip. Grainy, clearly filmed in some dive bar. Spencer, red-eyed, ranting to anyone who'd listen about how I was a fraud, how I'd stolen everything that was rightfully his. A handful of faces turned away from him, unimpressed. No one offered him a drink. No one offered him a hand. I watched it twice, feeling nothing. Not triumph, not pity. Just the quiet click of another door closing behind me. When the clip ended, I deleted the email. Chloe poked her head in a moment later, waving her tablet like a flag. "Boss, the new loyalty rollout's ready. Want to see?" I smiled. "Show me." She sat beside me on the couch, Marco leaning over her shoulder as slides flicked by. Clean policies. Better perks for real customers, not just legacy names. Fair. Transparent. Everything I'd promised. "You know," Marco said, tapping one slide, "we should expand this. Not just cruises. Eco-tours. Small charters, maybe a boutique island hub. Sea Star can be more than ships." I leaned back, the thought wrapping itself around my mind like the sea mist curling around the pier. "Then let's do it. But on our terms." Chloe's grin was all teeth and sunshine. "Captain Thornley at the helm." "Captain Thornley," I echoed, and for once the name didn't taste like a lie or a burden. It tasted like freedom. Out the window, the Sea Star Dream glowed against the dusk. She'd survived storms, secrets, and every whispered doubt they'd thrown at her. So had I. And as the tide rose against the pier, I knew that no one would ever dare tell me I was too poor, too small, too anything ever again. Because I'd already bought the ocean. The following weeks unfolded like a tide, pulling back to reveal what the storm had left behind. Southampton felt smaller somehow, the cold, brine air carrying whispers of a chapter closing and another cracking open like the sunrise over the water. I moved into a small flat above the new warehouse office. Nothing fancy, nothing to flaunt. It smelled of fresh paint, sawdust, and the salt that drifted in from the harbor below. At night, I'd stand at the single window overlooking the docks and feel the ghost of that cracked driveway where this had all begun. Some nights I could almost taste the sting of Spencer's mocking laugh. But it didn't land the way it used to. I was past that now. The Sea Star Dream stayed moored for upgrades, her hull echoing with the clang of welders and the shuffle of dock workers. I insisted on walking the gangway every morning, clipboard in hand, boots scuffed from salt and steel. The crew teased me for it. Our boss still thinks she's a deckhand. But they said it with pride now, not contempt. That was worth more than any headline. Chloe and Marco were fixtures at my side, one with her tablet forever blinking, the other with his quiet, watchful calm. We sat through endless strategy sessions for the new eco-tours, debated potential island hubs, even toyed with the idea of expanding to river cruises. The world felt wider than it ever had when I'd been the poor girl squeezed out of the family photos. And yet, under all the big plans and big money, I couldn't shake the whisper that something else still lurked beneath the waves. An old instinct. That soft warning in my ribs telling me you never really kill a secret. You bury it, you drown it, but sometimes it drifts back on the tide. ... It came back in the form of a single letter. I found it slipped under my door late one night, the wind rattling the window panes as rain dripped off the eaves. The envelope was thick, the paper expensive, the handwriting painfully familiar. Eleanor. Inside, a single page of her delicate script. My dearest Cressida, asterisk, perhaps you think I'm reaching out to you for money. I'm not. Perhaps you think I wish you harm. I don't. I have no right to ask you for forgiveness. Not after what we did to you. But I am asking you for one thing. Remember that you are not just a Thornley by name. You are still my daughter. Whatever else you may think of me, that much remains true. You have always been stronger than any of us deserved. I hope you can find peace. I read it 3 times, my fingers trembling so hard the paper quivered, like a trapped bird. It should have made me angry, but all it did was crack something open that I'd welded shut long ago. The mother, who never once took my side. The mother who watched Spencer run my life into the ground and called it, quote, keeping the family name intact. And now, in this rain-soaked flat above a warehouse, she was asking for peace. Part of me wanted to crumple the letter, toss it into the sea. Another part wanted to pick up the phone and call her, if only to hear her voice tremble the way mine had for years. But I did neither. I set the letter in a drawer and let it sit there. Like an old photograph you know you'll never hang on the wall, but can't quite bring yourself to burn. ... The next day, I was back on the Sea Star Dream when Marco found me pacing the upper deck. His breath clouded in the brisk morning air, a folder tucked under one arm. Got a lead on the next expansion site, he said, handing it over. A small island in the Cyclades. Untouched, sustainable, exactly what your eco-tour vision needs. I flipped through the photos. Crystal water, rocky beaches, a single crumbling dock waiting for a new story. Beautiful, I said. Too beautiful to ruin. Let's do it right this time. He grinned. You're not like the others, Cressida. They just slap a resort on it and bleed it dry. I met his eyes. Maybe, but not us. Not anymore. The words felt solid as the deck under my boots. There would be no more backroom deals, no more secrets buried in the dark. If I was building something, it would stand or fall on my own terms. ... That evening we hosted the crew for an impromptu storm-survived party. Folding chairs lined the cargo bay, music thumped off the steel walls, and cheap beer flowed like a promise that we were more than what they'd made us. I stood on an overturned crate to toast them, my voice echoing off the rivets and rust. To every hand that keeps this ship afloat, I said, lifting my plastic cup. To every storm we've weathered, and to the ones still to come, may we never fear them again. Cheers rose up like a wave, and for the first time since I'd stood alone on that cracked driveway, I felt it fully. I wasn't alone anymore. I'd built a family that had nothing to do with blood, and everything to do with loyalty freely given. As the party swirled on around me, I slipped out onto the deck. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky clear enough for the stars to break through. I closed my eyes, listening to the ship breathe under me, the hum of the generators, the soft slap of water against the hull, the laughter drifting up from below. For a moment, I thought I heard my father's voice again, just a ghost of it, woven through the wind. You were never too poor, Cressida. They were too blind to see what you were worth. I smiled, the salt on my lips tasting like the beginning of something vast and unforgiving, and completely mine. ... In the days that followed, the work doubled, then tripled. Contracts for the island acquisition. new architects, marine biologists, local councils to negotiate with. The kind of red tape that would have once sent me running. But now I devoured it like fuel. Chloe took to calling me Captain for real, a private joke that made Marco roll his eyes but never correct her. One night, well past midnight, I caught Marco dozing at his desk, a contract open beneath his cheek. I draped my jacket over his shoulders and slipped out to the balcony. Below, the Sea Star Dream glowed in dry dock, cranes arcing above her like cathedral spires. I pulled Eleanor's letter from my pocket. Creased now, the ink smudged at the edges. I read it again, waiting for the anger to spark, for the grief to twist the knife deeper. But it didn't come. All I felt was a kind of gentle ache, like pressing on an old bruise that no longer hurts but reminds you it was real. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat. Not forgiven, not forgotten, just carried, just there. The ocean stretched beyond the docks, black and endless under the stars. A promise and a threat in equal measure. And somewhere inside me, I made a quiet vow. Whatever storms waited out there, I would meet them head on. No more hiding. No more playing the poor girl at the gate. I was done asking for permission to stand where I belonged. Dash, 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 dot, dot. The tide turned just before dawn. A message pinged through from our new island contact. Approval for the first survey crew. The last piece falling into place. I laughed so hard I startled a pair of gulls off the railing. Permission to sail, Captain? Marco's sleepy voice called from behind me, blanket still draped around his shoulders. I turned to him, the wind teasing my hair into wild knots. Permission granted, I said. And this time, we own the horizon. When the survey team landed on the island, it felt like cracking open the first page of a story no one else had written yet. I watched from the deck of a small charter boat, the turquoise water rolling calm under a sky so blue it hurt to look at for too long. The island itself rose from the sea like an emerald, rocky in parts, its beaches narrow and rugged, fringed with scrubby trees that bent to the wind like they'd grown up fighting for their place in the sun. Marco stood beside me, hands braced on the rail, his boots leaving scuffs in the chipped paint. Chloe had stayed back at the Southampton office to manage the Sea Star Dream's final refit, but she'd sent me with enough to-do lists to pave the ocean floor. Hard to believe this place will be ours, Marco said, squinting at the shoreline. Doesn't look like much now. It's perfect, I said, my voice calm but my heart drumming in my throat. Not ruined yet, not polished for someone else's idea of paradise. He shot me a sideways look. You think you'll ever forgive them? The question landed like a pebble in my chest. My mind flicked back to Eleanor's letter tucked in my pocket, the words that lingered like sea fog at the edges of my thoughts. Stronger than we deserved. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think maybe that's not the point anymore. The survey boat docked at the island's battered pier, its boards gray and splintered from decades of storms. I stepped onto it first, the old wood creaking under my boots. My boots. No designer sandals, no luxury cruise pass bought by someone else's favor. Just me, the salt wind, and this patch of earth I'd fought to call mine. Marco and I trailed the surveyors as they spread out in pairs. Drones humming overhead, clipboards snapping open and shut. One of them, a young woman named Isla, paused beside a cluster of crumbling stone foundations half buried in wild grass. Locals say this used to be a fisherman's outpost, Isla explained, before the mainland investors tried to turn it into a private retreat in the 80s. The money dried up, they left, and nature took it back. I knelt and brushed my fingertips over the rough stones, feeling the grit lodge beneath my nails. I liked that. It reminded me that not everything needed to be polished to be valuable. Leave it, I said quietly. If we build here, this stays. A reminder of what happens when people take more than they give. Isla's eyes flicked to Marco, then back to me, something like respect in her gaze. Understood, Captain. I smiled at the title. Chloe's joke had stuck, and now the crew said it half serious, half in awe. Captain Thornley, the girl who'd once been too poor for a cabin, now owned the whole line and the island they'd anchor at next. We spent the day trekking the narrow beaches, marking the fragile dunes that would need protecting. Marco scribbled in his battered notebook, occasionally stopping to argue with Isla about the best spot for solar panels. By sunset, the team regrouped by the pier, their boots caked in sand, their eyes alive with plans. When we boarded the charter back to the Sea Star Dream, Marco turned to me, wiping sweat from his brow. "So what do we call it?" I leaned against the rail, the island shrinking into the dusk behind us. A dark shape crouched on the horizon. "Haven," I said. "Not paradise, not resort. Haven." He nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. "Haven it is then. .. Back at the docks, the Sea Star Dream glowed under its floodlights, her fresh paint gleaming like wet pearl. Crew bustled on deck, readying her for her first new voyage under my full command. When my boots hit the gangway, the crew cheered. Loud, genuine, nothing like the tight-lipped, polite applause from my family's holiday tables. Inside, Chloe was waiting at my suite door, tablet in hand. Her grin was electric. "Don't kill me, but the press wants a follow-up," she said. "Your From Cracked Driveway to Private Island saga is gold right now. They want to know what happens next." I laughed, exhausted but warm all through. "What happens next? Tell them this isn't the end. It's not even the middle." She nudged me toward my door. "Good answer, Captain." When I stepped into my suite, no longer a hidden corner, but the owner's cabin by name and deed, I found Eleanor's letter still tucked into the shelf above my desk. I pulled it down, ran my thumb over the folded edge. "Maybe you did love me," I whispered to the paper, the salt breeze pushing through the cracked window. "But you never knew how." I didn't cry. I just set the letter in my drawer and closed it tight. Some ghosts needed to stay ghosts. .. The day we sailed Haven's inaugural test voyage, the sun rose soft and pink over the open water. The Sea Star Dream slipped through the swell, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this run. Marco manned the bridge. Chloe handled the passenger welcome. I stood on deck alone for a while, letting the wind carve new lines into my face, new salt into my hair. I thought about Spencer. If he was out there, somewhere, he could watch this on the news. Or maybe he'd see the new brochures, my name stitched in gold thread on the back of every boarding pass. Cressida Thornley, captain and owner. He'd see the cabins he once told me I'd never belong in. The buffet lines, the deck chairs, the private balconies, all mine now. And no matter how hard he spat my name into a dive bar pint, he'd never touch any of it again. Chloe found me at the bow, leaning against the railing, the island, a speck behind us. "Got something for you," she said, pressing a small box into my palm. I opened it to find a brass compass. Old, a little battered, but polished clean. Inside the lid, an inscription, "For when you don't trust the stars." I laughed, blinking fast against the wind. "Where did you find this?" She shrugged, that easy grin splitting her face. "eBay, don't ruin the moment." I pulled her in for a hug, tight and quick. "Thank you, for everything." She stepped back, tapping the compass in my hand. "You don't need it, you know. You always knew where you were going." Maybe, but it felt good to have it anyway. As the Sea Star Dream cut through the open water, I felt it in my bones. The cracked driveway was gone. The thorned words, the shame, the nights alone with only my anger to keep me warm, all gone. Now there was just this. The salt wind, the crew who chose me every day, the island waiting on the horizon, and the promise that whatever waves came next, they'd crash against someone ready to meet them head-on. I looked down at the compass, then out at the endless blue. "Full speed ahead," I whispered, and let them all see me coming. Haven's grand opening arrived under a sun so bright it turned the sea into a living mirror, every wave a promise that no storm could last forever. I stood on the newly rebuilt dock, the planks still fragrant with fresh cedar, watching guests disembark from the Sea Star Dream one by one, wide-eyed, suntanned, curious about this island I'd carved out of the hush between old grudges and new hope. I'd kept my word. No sprawling luxury monstrosity, No towering resorts to choke the trees or poison the reefs. Haven was a village, a handful of eco-lodges tucked into the cliffs, winding footpaths shaded by scrubby palms and salt-resistant pines. Solar panels glinted above each cabin, and the only motorized transport was a single old golf cart that Marco insisted on driving like a getaway car whenever it rumbled between the dock and the welcome lodge. I walked with the guests up the pier, their laughter bouncing off the rocks, their excitement matching the hum in my chest. Each time someone turned to me, "Captain Thornley, is this yours?" I'd answer with the same quiet pride, "It's ours." Because that's what it had become. Not just my revenge project, not just a monument to every slight I'd ever swallowed, but a living, breathing thing, a haven in more ways than one. By sunset, the opening dinner was in full swing. Tables ringed with lanterns were scattered across the bluff that overlooked the cove, strings of warm bulbs dancing above our heads like low stars. Marco manned the grill, flipping fish caught that morning, arguing with Chloe over the music selection. The staff mixed freely with the guests. No invisible walls, no lines drawn in sand. I slipped away as dusk settled in. Up the narrow path to the highest overlook, the place I'd already claimed as my private vantage point. From here, the lights of Haven twinkled like fireflies. The Sea Star Dream rested at anchor just offshore, her hull catching the last blush of the sun. In my pocket, Eleanor's letter was creased and thin now from the number of times I'd folded and unfolded it. I pulled it out one last time, the words soft in the fading light. "Stronger than we deserved." It didn't sting anymore. It just felt true. When I heard footsteps behind me, I didn't startle. Chloe's silhouette appeared, lantern in hand, the wind catching her hair and whipping it around her grin. "Figured you'd be up here." "Just taking it in," I said. She nudged me with her shoulder. "Speech time, Captain." I already thanked everyone. "Not good enough. This place needs your words, and so do we." I exhaled a laugh, my breath fogging in the cooling air. "Fine, let's go." Haven's grand opening arrived under a sun so bright it turned the sea into a living mirror, every wave a promise that no storm could last forever. I stood on the newly rebuilt dock, the planks still fragrant with fresh cedar, watching guests disembark from the Sea Star Dream one by one, wide-eyed, sun-tanned, curious about this island I'd carved out of the hush between old grudges and new hope. I'd kept my word. No sprawling luxury monstrosity, no towering resorts to choke the trees or poison the reefs. Haven was a village. A handful of eco-lodges tucked into the cliffs, winding footpaths shaded by scrubby palms and salt-resistant pines. Solar panels glinted above each cabin, and the only motorized transport was a single old golf cart that Marco insisted on driving like a getaway car whenever it rumbled between the dock and the welcome lodge. I walked with the guests up the pier, their laughter bouncing off the rocks, their excitement matching the hum in my chest. Each time someone turned to me, "Captain Thornley, is this yours?" I'd answer with the same quiet pride, "It's ours," because that's what it had become. Not just my revenge project, not just a monument to every slight I'd ever swallowed, but a living, breathing thing, a haven in more ways than one. By sunset, the opening dinner was in full swing. Tables ringed with lanterns were scattered across the bluff that overlooked the cove, strings of warm bulbs dancing above our heads like low stars. Marco manned the grill, flipping fish caught that morning, arguing with Chloe over the music selection. The staff mixed freely with the guests, no invisible walls, no lines drawn in sand. I slipped away as dusk settled in. Up the narrow path to the highest overlook, the place I'd already claimed as my private vantage point. From here, the lights of Haven twinkled like fireflies. The Sea Star Dream rested at anchor just offshore, her hull catching the last blush of the sun. In my pocket, Eleanor's letter was creased and thin now from the number of times I'd folded and unfolded it. I pulled it out one last time, the words soft in the fading light. "Stronger than we deserved." It didn't sting anymore. It just felt true. When I heard footsteps behind me, I didn't startle. Chloe's silhouette appeared, lantern in hand, the wind catching her hair and whipping it around her grin. "Figured you'd be up here." "Just taking it in," I said. She nudged me with her shoulder. "Speech time, Captain." "I already thanked everyone." "Not good enough. This place needs your words, and so do we." I exhaled a laugh, my breath fogging in the cooling air. "Fine, let's go." Dot. When I stepped back into the circle of lights, the laughter quieted. Faces turned, some familiar, some new, all of them part of this battered little fleet I'd built from broken trust and raw belief. I climbed up onto the old driftwood bench Marco had dragged up for the band earlier. The lights glowed warm across the sand, the surf whispering just out of reach. I cleared my throat, the hush wrapping around me like a blanket. When I was a girl, my family told me I was too poor to come on a cruise like this one. Too poor to deserve a cabin with a view, or a seat at the captain's table. Too poor to belong anywhere that asked you to stand tall and own your worth. I paused, letting the truth settle, the wind tugging at the hem of my linen shirt. But what they didn't know was that the ocean doesn't care who your family is. It doesn't care how deep your pockets are, or what name is stamped on your boarding pass. The ocean only cares that you have the courage to face the waves when they come. Faces nodded back at me. Crew, guests, families who'd never met me a year ago, but would follow this strange, sharp-edged girl who'd bought her freedom wave by wave. I lifted my glass, the reflection of the lanterns dancing inside it. So here's to every wave we've met, and every storm we've survived. Here's to building something no one can take away, not with gossip, or greed, or guilt. Here's to a place where nobody's ever too poor to stand at the railing and claim the horizon as their own. They raised their glasses too, a soft chorus of yeses and cheers that blended with the hush of the tide. And when I stepped down, Chloe caught me in a hug, fierce and brief. "You did it," she whispered. "No ghosts left." I didn't correct her. Some ghosts stay, but they stay quiet when you stop feeding them. Later that night, long after the last lantern was snuffed out, I walked alone down to the edge of the cove. The stars overhead were so bright they turned the waves silver. I slipped off my shoes, the sand cool under my feet, and waded in up to my knees. Somewhere out beyond the reef, the Sea Star Dream rocked gently at anchor, waiting to sail again. And behind her, the dark horizon curved away in every direction, full of places we hadn't claimed yet, storms we hadn't faced. I thought about Spencer, wherever he was, drowning in his own bitterness. I thought about Eleanor in her too big house, her 2 silent rooms. And then I let them drift off like flotsam. Not forgiven? Just done. When I turned back to Haven, I saw my people waiting for me under the strings of lights. Marco nursing a half-finished drink, Chloe spinning some wild plan for our next expansion to a new crew recruit. And I knew with every bone in my body that no matter what came next, we'd be ready. I pulled Eleanor's letter from my pocket one last time, kissed the edge of it, and let the tide pull it from my fingers. It floated there, a small white ghost, before the current carried it out to where the water deepened, where it would sink and rest in the dark with all the other secrets we'd finally set free. "Full speed ahead," I whispered to the stars. "Because once you've bought the ocean, you never have to ask permission again." 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.